Maybe you've recently purchased a Cool Fall Spy 007, 005, or Trek, but you've yet to dive into programming it. Or perhaps you were thinking of purchasing one and you heard that it was the most advanced driver on the market and you want to know everything it can do. Then this is the video for you. Welcome back to Schullights. This video is intended to be an owner's manual on how to use your Cool Fall Spy 007 flashlight. We'll be covering the latest model as of this video, which is the Sapphire STFU Mark IV version 3.1 driver. This is the one that comes with the XBL High, maybe an XML2 or a 209B or a 509A Nichia. But this manual will work for most Cool Fall lights like the 005 or older Mark II and Mark III spies. While this video is designed to be standalone, I'm going to strike a balance between the running time of the video and how much detailed depth I go into. So if you want to know even more detail or simply want to see written instructions on what we're doing here, then visit the official Cool Fall website at coolfall.com, click on Support tab, and then scroll down to where you see the owner's manual link. Today we'll be covering 9 different chapters: the quick start guide, how to change the batteries, how to use the 007, care and cleaning, backdoor programming, the attachment rail, lanyard hole, Easter eggs, and then lastly the battery spring O-rings and tritium markers. So let's start off with the quick start guide. So no matter what model of spy you have, they all work roughly the same, whether it's a spy, a Trek, or the Tri-V. So there is a knob right on the front of the light here, which rotates and sets the power levels. So I'm going to use the Trek for a moment just because it's more obvious which level I'm set to. And notice that there are 7 positions. We call them 0 through 6. So when it's off, that would be 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it stops. There's a hard stop at max and a hard stop at 0, so it's not going to rotate 360 degrees all the way through. But position 0 is always off, 1 is usually the lowest, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 get progressively higher. If you rotate the knob and nothing happens, check the batteries. If your 007 is equipped with the optional Vegas knob, you may have to unlock the knob at the top here in order to be able to turn it. So to unlock, you just pull it out like this, and then you should be able to turn it freely. Chapter 2, changing batteries. So there's 3 types of caps. There is the, let's go to the camera here. There is the military cap that looks like this. It's got a little detent right there that it's kind of flush. This is the military cap. There is the quick release cap. That is this one. And the detent is machined to be able to push with your fingernail. And then lastly, there is the vault. And the vault looks like this, and there's no detent on it, but that's because this is a twist-off style cap where you just twist it and then it releases. So if you're changing batteries on any of these, let me show you how that's done. So let's start with the military knob. The military knob has this little detent, as I said right here, but you can't get at it with your fingernail. It's just too difficult. So typically you're going to use a pencil, like with the soft pencil lead, and just push it in, or maybe a toothpick. Also, if you have a lanyard, you can have a little brass bead like this, and this is kind of convenient because you can just put the brass bead right there and you push. Now when I push in against it, notice that the cap is going to kind of pop off. See, it pops off because of the springs. So be ready to catch it, or else this cap will go flying across the room. So now the battery insertion direction, and I'll get to the other caps in a second here, is always in series. So that means one's going to go in opposite of the other one. And the way you got to think about it is that the positive end of the battery is going to go towards the emitter or the light emitting end. So put the positive end in that way. Then the other one is going to go the other direction because it makes a U electrical path. Then take the door here, the cap, and just go ahead and line up the little detent with the engraved detent marker on the side of the light. It will not fit both ways. It'll only go one way. So you just kind of fit it on and then push it closed. So that's the military. Let's take a look at the quick release on the Trek. So we're going to put our finger right here, and again, be ready to catch this. push in and it pops off. Same thing with the batteries. You can see that they're in a kind of series path here. Then push it on and it clicks. And lastly, the vault. The vault is definitely my favorite of the 3 door types. And you can see that there's the same marker, but this time there's just a little divot on the side. And what you do is you just kind of turn it about 5 degrees, about that far, and that just comes off. So this is really great because not only do you not need any equipment to get it open, but when you go to program the light, the programming is done by taking the cap on and off. You'll see that when you get to the programming section, and it just makes doing all the different power-ups and backdoors so much easier. So I find that the vault is really easy to program. I find that the quick release right here with my little finger detent is really easy. I find it less easy on the military, but still not difficult. 2 more things I want to go over quickly. That is, when you push into the detent, the little door kind of just pops off like I showed you. It kind of pops off because it's spring-loaded. However, and invariably, if this is your first SPY, this is going to happen to you at some point, you're going to want to charge your batteries, and you're going to have the cap off, and you're going to think, oh, dust will get in there. And then you'll go ahead and put the cap on like this with no batteries. Now, this is a problem because there's nothing in there to push against the springs to help the cap get off. So what you got to do if this occurs to you is you got to push while you pull. So it's not the hardest thing, but it is a little tricky. So you push and pull. And I remember the first time I did this, I was freaking out because I thought it wasn't going to come off. And you can see that with this one, it is not the easiest, but I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it, I promise. So push and got it. So you can see that I just had to kind of push in, get my finger down there and pull it out. As I said, it's not like the hardest thing ever, but it's definitely tricky enough that the first time you do it, you're never going to do it again. So just be sure that you always insert the batteries the correct way and have the cap on only when the batteries are inside. When you're charging it and the batteries are outside, just leave the cap off. Easiest way to do it. One last thing I want to point out is anytime you change the batteries, you're charging it, you put them back in, just make sure that you go ahead and turn the light on for a moment and then turn it off. The reason for that is because anytime you disconnect power and power it back up, the STFU driver goes into a higher power state and it won't go into sleep mode until you've used the light once and turned it off. When you do that, that signals the driver to go into the lowest mode, power mode possible. And so what happens if you don't do that? Well, it'll be in this higher mode, and then if you were to store the light on your shelf for a month or 2, the batteries would drain pretty much dead. So I suggest you always turn it on and off, and then the light will sit on a shelf for years without draining the batteries. All right, chapter 3, how to use the 007. Well, the first thing I want to point out is that there's no correct way or right way to hold the SPY. So I think that most people typically kind of hold it like this, meaning, let's get on the camera here, with, in kind of a pistol grip like this, so that your finger's down here and you can click on it like that. But I mean, there's no right way. So if you want to hold it this way and use your thumb or something, I mean, that's up to you. But the good thing about holding it this way is that with one finger, especially on the knob that comes with a SPY, you can just easily flick all the way to turbo in just one flick. That's the highest mode right there. So it's got this insanely fast knob turning that's really easy to do from off to on. And so it makes it kind of one of the fastest lights you can get to turbo with. Another cool thing about using it like this with your finger like this is that you can subconsciously modulate the power as you use it. So you might turn it up to see something, and then when you get something closer, you'll just go down a mode or 2. So by doing it like that, it just means that you're going to use less battery power than on a typical light where you set it to one mode and just kind of stay there. Another thing I should point out is that when you get to modes 5 and 6, which are the higher power modes, they do tend to use up the batteries quickly. So if you want your batteries to last in your light for a few days, I suggest you use, modes 4, 3, 2, or 1, something like that. So 5 and 6 put out a lot of light, but they consume a lot more power. 5 is typically half an amp and 6 is typically a full amp. And so the batteries would be dead within an hour or so. So just note that modes 4 and down if you want the batteries to last for several days on a trip or something like that. Now, when we talk about the batteries you can use CR123s, so off-the-shelf lithiums, which are excellent. You can also use rechargeable lithium 16340s, which is what I'm using in the lights here. So the benefits to the 16340s is that they actually have a higher discharge rate. And if you want to go into the programming on the light, you can set the light up to a full 3.3 amps and get about 1,000 lumens on most emitter types. So you can get a light that is very bright, but that's typically with the 16340s only. The non-rechargeable CR123s typically don't have the same amount of amperage, and so 1 amp is a good limit for those. I also want to point out that when you're using 16340 batteries, you might want to use slots 3 or 4, which have low voltage protection. And if you're using the non-rechargeable CR123s, you probably want to use slot 1 or 2, which doesn't have low voltage protection. We'll talk more about that in the programming setup in the slots. So if you want to see more, you can just jump to that chapter. I also want to point out that if your light is equipped with a Vegas knob like this one, the Vegas knob is a locking crown, and I'll show you very quickly how that works. So first off, there's 3 positions. Let me get a really good focus on this Vegas crown. There we go, really good focus. So this Vegas knob has dice pips all the way across. It's got the off square there, then pip 1 through 6 for the 6 different power levels. Now, the crown has 3 positions it can be in, 3 races. So you can push it all the way in, and you can see that it's actually below the surface of the top of the knob here. Or you can pull it out 1 notch. Let me get my fingernail in there. There you go, 1 notch to the middle. And that's so this is called locked all the way in. This middle one is called unlocked. And then if you pull it out a little bit, it is called spin. Now, what the crown, I should say, is for locking out use of the light or restricting the light to only certain levels. So let me show you how this works really quickly. So first I want to say that if the knob is in the middle or all the way out, it's not restricting anything. So you can have the light off and you can go mode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way. Now, the knob all the way out into the spin position, you can actually turn the crown. So I'll show you right there that I'm turning it. And if you notice that the crown has knurling on the top here, the knurling, and then on one spot right there, it's got a divot, a little dot. That dot is currently lined up with 6. So right now, if my knob is in the 6th position, it is effectively disabled, meaning that I can use all 6 positions. But what I'm going to do is, when the knob is pulled all the way out into spin, if I turn it to, let's say, 3, so you can see the divot is now over 3, and then I push it all the way in, what's going to happen is, I'm on power 0 right now. I can go to 1, 2, 3, because that's where the divot is selected, but I can't go any further. It's physically locked out with a titanium peg internally. So this is a good way to kind of lock the light out, hand it to like a child or loved one, and make sure that they don't overuse the batteries or overheat the light from running it too hot. The middle race, which is called unlock, let me get this out for a second here. Boop, there we go. Notice that I'm still in position 3, but now it's unlocked, which means I can go past 3 all the way to 6. So in, we'll lock it. 1 position out into the middle called unlock will unlock it so you got full use, but then the crown itself is still where you left it. And notice that the crown will move with the entire dial, so the crown doesn't lose a position you've set. Now, if you want to set it to a new position, let's say set it to 1, so I can only go to moonlight, then I pull it out all the way. I can now spin it, align it with the moonlight, the level 1 pip, push it in all the way, and now I can go to 1 and I can't go any further. It's just 1. So that's how the Vegas knob works. Pretty cool. And if you watch David Livingston's video, it's insane amount of machining to get this done. A very cool technical feat. If you have the Vegas knob, you probably have the Spy Ultra version, which means you also have the Vault cap. And so the Vault cap is released by twisting it and then pulling off. I already covered this in the battery section, but it's such a oft asked question that I thought I'd cover it here as well. So you just twist and it pops off. Chapter 4, care and cleaning. So titanium is a very hard metal, but it can be scratched, even by metals that are less hardness like plastic. So don't place your light in your pocket against keys or something like that. It will definitely scratch it up. But also notice that the machine finish, and let's go back to my light here, and this is a machine finish all over these surfaces, and then right here, this is stone wash. This machine finish, where it's shiny like this, will show scratches easier than hard anodized aluminum lights that you may be used to. So if you want to use it, and you don't mind it getting some character marks, just do it. But if you're trying to keep this finish the best it can be, use a soft cloth like this one. Maybe if you need to, a solution of water with just a drop of Dawn in a fair amount of water, and wipe with the machine marks. So for example, let me get a close up here. You can see that I have, there we go, especially on the bottom here, it looks a little bit like, not scratch, but rough. And those are just finger oils and marks from my hand. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna wipe with the grain like this. And you can see it gets it nice and shiny again, okay? So just, again, wipe with the grain. If you wipe against the grain, even the wiping with the cloth could potentially make the light scratch. Definitely don't use anything like a paper towel. Paper towels are made of wood, and wood will scratch this. So a cotton-based, dry, soft cloth, or if you've got some heavy gook on there, as I said, a solution with just a drop of Dawn in it. Chapter 5, Backdoor Programming. Now this is where you're going to realize exactly how cool the drivers in the Coolfall Spies are. There's an amazing amount of configuration that you can do with these drivers, and they're simply the most advanced EDC flashlights on the market. So when you put batteries in the Spy and then you snap the cap on, that's a power up, okay? And it powers up the STFU processor. Here's a good time to explain that the STFU stands for Super Tiny Coolfall Microprocessor. So STF, and then they use the micro symbol. If you power up in position 0, so I have, the light off, I turn and take the cap off with the Vault, and then I put it back on. You'll see a little flash there, and then it's off. Because position 0 is the normal operating mode. It's not a programming backdoor. So typically, have the light off, do your battery swap, and it'll just be normal use. Now, I do want to point out that even when you do a battery swap like that, you should turn the light on once and off to get it in the ultra low power mode, because I once had a problem where I did a battery swap, I did some charging, put it in, popped the cap back on and set it on the shelf, and then about 2 months later, the batteries were dead. And that's because the STFU was still in a higher power mode. So just make sure you turn it on once and off, and it'll be the ultra low power mode. All right, now any other position that the light could be in, okay, let me go to the close-up here. So if I'm in 0 and I pop it on, I'm in normal mode. But if I'm in any other position when I pop the cap on, I'm going to be entering a backdoor programming mode, okay? So let's go ahead and list really quickly what the programming modes are. So power up, 0, so if I'm in the 0 position, part of the knob that is facing the emitter is the part we're on. And so that's a normal change of batteries, and that's not a backdoor. But if I were on position 1, so again, the cap will be off like this. But if I'm in position 1 right there, this will be the select configuration slot. Position 2 would be the enable or disable lockout mode. Position 3 would be a factory reset and calibration. Position 4 would be to program the levels on the light, get a lower moonlight, for example, or a higher max. Position 5 would be a power report, and this is something I haven't really seen on any other light. I think it's a phenomenal feature. And then position 6 is the best battery level indicator I've ever seen implemented on a light. So those are your positions. So again, if you don't mean to go to any of these programming backdoors, just be on 0 when you pop the cap back on. But I'm just going to show you really quickly the position 3, which is the factory reset. If I set this to position 3, so 3 is now towards the emitter, and I pop the cap back on, that's it. This is now performing a factory calibration and reset. I'll go into a little more detail when we get to Power Up 3, but that's it. That's all you got to do to perform a factory reset. Let's go ahead and talk about Power Up 1, okay? Power Up 1 is how you select configuration slots. The SPY holds 4 distinct flashlight configurations called slots. So, for example, if you're in slot 1, and this is all internally configured inside the light, then you can set up all the power levels of the light. So all 6 positions on the knob can be set up specifically to slot 1, and slot 2 and 3 and 4 can have different settings. So for example, you could set up slot 1 for the kind of stuff you do around the house. Or slot 2 could be for like walking the dog at night. And slot 3 could be for when you go camping and you want lower power levels so that you can last days without recharging. See? So in this way, the light is super configurable. Now, the way you change slots is very simple, okay? So I'm going to be on pip 1 here, and then I'm going to take the cap off, and I'm going to put it back on. And you'll see that the light will flash once. There it is. And that confirms that we just changed to slot 1. Now let's say I want to change to slot 2 or 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still use Power Up 1. So I'll still be in position 1. So let me go ahead and take the cap off first this time because you don't have to have it on. So let's go ahead and put it on position 1 there. Now I'm going to put the cap back on, and it gives me a moment to set this to position 2. And when I do, it's going to read it and confirm with 2 flashes that I'm now in slot 2. Let's do it one more time for slot 3. So take it off, set the knob to position 1 because I'm doing a Power Up 1, right? Then put the battery cap back on, then quickly turn it to position, let's say, 3 here. And notice it will now flash 3 times. So that's the way you switch between all 4 slots, and you can set up the slots any way you want. The only additional thing I'll point out is that there's low voltage protection in slots 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 are kind of like designed for 16340 rechargeables, and there's going to be battery monitoring throughout the life of the light. And when it gets to 3.25 volts, it's going to shut the light off to protect the integrity of the batteries, because batteries really shouldn't get down to 3 volts. Now, here's what's cool about this. Let's say you're using it at, mode 5, so a higher power mode. When it gets to 3.25, the light's going to shut off. Now, all you got to do, let's say if you don't want to be stuck in the dark without light. So all you got to do is turn it off, turn the light off, then turn it back on again. And it'll come back on. Now here's the thing. It'll come on because it was under load and the battery got to 3.25. And by turning it off, the voltage of the battery will go back up. Okay. So if you try to go straight to a high mode again, like 5 or 6, it'll just turn off again. But turn it to like 4, turn it to 3, and you're going to get more runtime. You'll be surprised how effective this is. Let's say you were camping and it was nighttime and your batteries were running at 3.25. You got 2 options. One is to turn it off and go to a lower mode. And if you go to mode 1 or 2, you're going to get hours more out of these batteries. You're going to find because the voltage is not drooping under high current. Another situation that you could do, and it's not, recommended, but notice how I said that low voltage protection was on slots 3 and 4. You could turn the light off, do a power up 1, go to slot 1 or 2. There's no low voltage protection in those slots. So in that manner, you could run the batteries all the way down, sacrifice the health of the batteries for the sake that you needed light. Now, if you're running disposable lithium CR123s in the light, then I recommend you move to positions 1 or 2 because you don't want these lights shutting off when they get to 3.25. I mean, those lithium batteries pretty much only start at 3 volts. So it would be problematic. So go ahead and run them in slot 1 or 2. Now we're still in programming. Let's talk about Power Up 2. Power Up 2 is the ability to enable and disable lockout mode. So by default, the flashlight ships with lockout mode disabled. And if you ever do a reset, a factory reset on the light, it will be disabled. So what you're going to do is you're going to use Power Up 2 to enable the lockout. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cap off. We're going to move to position 2 here, right? Position 2 to get Power Up 2. Now when I turn this back on like that, notice it did a fast flutter. That fast flutter, that pulse, actually depicts a 0, and that means I've just turned it off. So that could have either mean that I already had lockout mode enabled on this light, or it can mean that when I was fumbling with the vault cap, I accidentally connected power and then disconnected and connected again. So let me try again. So let me make sure that I'm still in 1, 2 positions. Let me enable power here. And I still saw a flutter. So let me try again. There we go. That's what I wanted. I got 1 strobe just then. So that strobe indicates that lockout mode is now on. Now the way you do lockout mode, and notice that there's normal operation here, is you quickly, and I mean quickly, go to full power and back. So it looks like this. If you do that properly, then what happens is, now you see I'm in lockout mode. And it's depicted by the fact that when I'm in off, I don't see anything. When I go to any power mode, I see a quick strobe, a quick blip flash, and then nothing happens. So if you ever see that, that means you're in lockout mode. Now, to get back out of lockout mode, you got 2 ways to do it. One way is just, again, like that. And you can see now I'm in normal operation again. Or you could have taken off the battery cap and gone to position 2 and re-enabled. And I saw the little flutter. So I now know that that lockout is disabled. So now even if I do this really fast, see, it's still on. All right, so that's lockout mode. Lockout mode's pretty cool, but I gotta mention that if I got a Vegas knob, I can just lock it out in 0. I mean, I can literally physically lock the knob from turning, so I don't need to use the driver's electronic lockout mode. And also, I want to point out that on like a Trek, it becomes kind of hard to kind of get that knob to go all the way around fast enough. Being able to do this fast enough is it's not impossible, but it's not easy. So, but again, I mean, I don't know that I need it on the Trek because there is more resistance to this knob. It's a harder knob to turn. I've never had this knob accidentally turn on in my pocket. So that's Power Up 2 lockout mode. All right, now let's talk about Power Up 3, factory reset and calibration. So in factory reset and calibration, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the cap off, you're gonna move it to position 3. So remember, you start on 0, so 1, 2, 3, and then I put the cap on. And when I do that, now you're gonna see a series of flashes like that, and then it's gonna go to about 1 amp current, and then it's going to dim, and you're gonna see it keep going up and down and up and down. Now, what it's doing is it is doing a sweep. And these sweeps is where the driver is actually kind of recording the forward voltage of the emitter that's in there as it applies amperage, and it's calibrating and recording that. So it's a really awesome feature that I've only seen on this light, And, you want to do a power up 3 in these situations. If you've ever changed a power level and just kind of mucked it up and you want to get back to default, okay, do a power up 3. If your light's acting strangely, do a power 3. If you've modded the light and put in a new LED and you want to do the power up 3 because it's going to record the new forward voltages of this new LED. You also want to do it anytime you just can't remember what the settings are or, of the slot that you're in. So another thing I want to point out is when you do the power up 3, it does the factory reset, and the factory reset records the new forward voltages of the new emitter. So that's kind of like for the entire light. But it also resets the power settings of the 6 positions for the slot that you're on. It does not obliterate the other 3 slots. So a factory reset calibration is kind of interesting. It calibrates, which is one thing, and does a factory reset on the slot you're in. It also resets some global settings like whether you have haptics on, and we'll talk about haptics later. So if you turn haptics on, haptics are kind of global. They just appear in all the different slots. And when you do a power up 3 in any one of the slots, you'll notice that the haptics have been reset. So my light has just completed. It took, about 30 seconds to a minute, something like that. If you are doing a calibration, the light does not read this knob during the calibration. So during a power up 3, you can have this, once it starts, once the initial sweep happens and it starts calibrating, you can turn this to any setting and it won't turn it off. So in fact, I don't recommend turning it off, because if you were to remove the battery cap to stop it from calibrating, you're going to have like a partial calibration. You need to recalibrate again. So just let it complete. But I mean, if you're in an emergency situation, you got to stop it, then pull the cap. That's the only way you can stop it. But again, recalibrate when you got a chance. All right, now we're in my favorite section of the power-ups, programming the light. Programming the light is so cool. It is the best that I've seen on any light because of the fact that it gives you complete power to set up every different mode exactly the way you want. Things don't have to be progressive, meaning you could start out dim, then go to turbo, then go dim again, then go whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Also, you set the light by its current, which is such a great way to do it, because you'll say that I want, mode 1, position 1 to be 5 milliamps, and I'll have position 6 to be 1 amp. Well, now, not only do you have a very specific idea of what you're going to get brightness-wise, but you definitely know what your runtime is going to be. It's just math, right? You take the amp hours of the battery, divide by the current, you get how long it's going to run. So it's just a great way to do it. Now, another thing that I want to point out before we get started here is that by factory default, the highest output you're going to get on the light, so when you're in position 6, is 1 amp. So 1 amp is a continuous duty cycle, meaning that at 1 amp, you should be able to run it 100% of the time until the battery, gives out. And the heat that's generated should be able to keep up with the light. Now, this is a very small light. This light has a small thermal mass. So 1 amp is, the duty cycle for it. If you want to go higher, you can. You can set to 1.5 amps, 2 amps, 3 amps, 3.3 amps is the ceiling. And it makes sense because 3.3 amps is about where most emitters start to die. They start to get overcurrent and they, fizz out and go blue. So, as I said, if you do a power up or it just came to you from the factory, it's going to be at 1 amps at the highest. And we're going to set it to 3.3 amps as a demo in a moment here. Another thing you might want to do is you might want to set the moonlight lower. The moonlight is pretty low to begin with. That's mode 1, but I like a really low moonlight. I like a 1/10 of a lumen moonlight, so we'll do that as well. When you enter the power up 4, let's talk about this. It's a little confusing at first, but once you get it, it sticks in your brain. You got it forever. So you just have to kind of reason it out. It makes a lot of sense. All right, let's talk about it before we do it, okay? So, power up 4. So that means you're going to take the battery cap off, you're going to turn the dial to position 4, put the cap on. Now, when you do that, it's going to flash for 10 seconds. That's giving you 10 seconds to get in your mind and physically turn the knob to where you want to program. What I mean by that is, so the power up 4, right? I'm going to pop the cap off. I'm going to set it to position 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Pop the cap back on. You're going to see it start flashing. And then you got to think to yourself, which position do I now want to alter? So let's start by altering position 6. Let's take it up to the highest it can go, the 3.3 amps, okay? So what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to do this on camera, is I've got it, the cap off. I'm going to turn this position 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put it on. Now I'm going to put it on and just show you that flash really quickly. There's that flash. Okay, that's giving me 10 seconds to set what position I want. Now I'm still on 4, right? So if I wait, you'll see it changes. I would now be programming position 4, which I don't want to do. I want to program position 6. So here, let me pop this off, and now it's a good time to say that if you interrupt the position, power up 4, the programming, by pulling the cap off, that is not going to harm the light. That's going to just go ahead and reset to the values it had before you started this. So let's go to 1, 2, 3, 4 for power 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the cap on and quickly move to position 6. When this flashing stops, and there it is, I am now programming position 6. Okay, cool. Now, that's the first thing you need to know, that little sequence of events. Now, here's the next thing you need to know. Next thing you need to know is once you've selected a position on that dial that you want to alter, and I just did that, right? Then what you got to do is you got to hit something called the home position, and then you are going to move the knob to different positions that stand for how many milliamps you want to set that. Okay, that sounds confusing. Let me walk you through it. All right, so for example, I'm going to put the light to position 6, okay? It's going to go steady. Then I'm going to turn the light down, and position 1 is going to indicate home and to be fast flashing. So at this point, it'll be going. Now, if I go up 1 from home, that's the ones column, meaning I'm adding 1 milliamp. If I go up from there, I go to tens column, adding 10 milliamps. 100s column, adding 100 milliamps. And lastly, 1000s column, adding 1000 milliamps. Now there's one position left, right? And that last position is a special position that actually uses dimming values to set ultra low moonlights. So we'll get to that in a second. Okay, I'm gonna walk you through this slowly with the cap off and the batteries not connected. And then I'm gonna do it quicker as I talk about it, okay? So we are gonna go power up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to put the cap on. It's going to start flashing. We've got 10 seconds to decide which position knob we want to alter. So we want to alter 6. So I go all the way up to 6. And it's still flashing. And when the 10 seconds is over, then we go to steady output. Steady output indicates 6 is locked in. Now what I do is I turn the knob until I get to position 1. But I don't really have to think about it. I just have to watch. Because when I get to position 1, what's going to happen is it's going to start strobing really fast. Okay, strobing really fast. And you can see that that would be off. This is 1. Don't go to off though. Just go to 1. It's called the home position. Emitter will be fast flashing. So on the screen right now, you can see that I've got the knob positions listed on screen. So you go to 1, fast flashing. Now, what I'm going to decide is in my head, I'm going to say, hey, what do I want to set this mode to? And I'm going to say, I want to set to 3.3 amps. So if you look at the list that's on screen right now, you can see that I can add by ones, tens, hundreds, or thousands. So the way I'm going to do it in this case is from home, I'm going to go up to thousands. So I'm going to count this out verbally. I'm going to switch it one position up and say ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. Now, when I get to thousands, since I've gone and peaked up to thousands, the driver's saying, he probably wants to add 1,000. It ignores all the other modes I swept through because it only looks at the highest you went to. And since I went to thousands, it goes, okay, he wants to program thousands. Now I go down and that locks that in. It goes, yes, add 1,000. Now that I've gone down to the hundreds category, I can go back up to thousands. And when I do that, it goes, he must want to add another 1,000. And then I go down again. Then I go up for a third time. So that's the third 3,000. And then I go down until I get to home. And right there, I would see the fast flashing again. So at this point, I've told the light I want to add 3 amps. But I really want 3.3, don't I? So when I'm at the home position again, I just count again the positions. I go ones, tens, hundreds. And when I get to hundreds, I do the same thing. I go down 200, down 300, and then back down to home. And at that point, it would now know the position 6 wanted 3.3 amps. One of the coolest things about programming is you can just, go to the off position and then it'll sweep and it'll lock it in. Or once you go to the off position, it actually gives you 10 seconds to get it back to another position on the knob and you can program another position. So you can literally cascade, kind of like daisy chain the programming. And in this way, you can program a whole bunch of positions at once. So let's go ahead and do this on camera now. Okay, so here we go. So first things first, I'm off 1, 2, 3, 4. Why did I go to 4? Because it's power up 4 to do this. Okay, put it on. We got the 10 seconds of flashing. I get to position 6. It will go steady to lock in that we're editing 6. Now I go down carefully until I see the strobing. Now I'm in home. Now remember, I'm going to go up to the you always go to highest numbers first. So go to the thousands first. So ones, tens, hundreds, 1,000. That's 1,000. 2,000. 3,000. Now go back all the way down to home, and we'll do different, different column on our numbers here. We're going to go to hundreds this time. So ones, tens, 100, 200, 300, and back down. Now at this point, I could even add like, 1 milliamp or something like that. But I only wanted 3.3, so I'm good. Now I'm going to go back to 0 and see the flashing. This is where I could set up another position on the knob and edit another value. Do this whole thing again for, position 1, 2, or 3. But once it is calibrating here, because it's calibrating the new power mode, it will then sweep 3 times, tell you it's finished, and then this whole process is done. So let's just wait it out. There it goes, there's a sweep. And now it's ready to be used. So now I got, position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this is the 3.3, and you can see it's much brighter than it used to be. Okay? Now let's do another programming, okay? This time, I'm going to show you what position 6 is. That's the dimming values. So, back on screen, here's all the position knobs, right? When you enter into the programming power up 4. 6 is special because when you hit 6, it's going to start dimming the values to below 5 milliamps. And the reason why is because when you get to these fractions of a milliamp, you really got to do it visually. So that's the way it goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that dimming really quickly here. So again, let's take the cap off to do a power up. We're going to do power up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Put it on. Now, I want to set the moonlight. So I got it in 1, which is the lowest position for me. now that it's fast flashing because I'm also in the home position, right? Because it's in 1, so I didn't have to find that. Now I'm going to go all the way up to 6, and that's going to start dimming values. So if you just watch it, you'll see it'll just get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And it gets super dim, folks. Like, you can have the craziest low moonlight you can ever imagine. Watch this. Look how low it's getting. Okay, I'll just turn it off here. Now, when you turn it off, it's going to fast flash like that for a bit, and then it's going to sweep. And you're going to see that that first position is now a crazy low moonlight. So watch this. You can barely tell it's on. Watch. Off. On. You can barely tell. Let's get a really good close-up. It's one of the strengths of this light. And that little flicker when it turns on, I didn't ask Dave about this, but I assume that's called kind of a kickstart to the emitter. Most emitters need like a little bit of extra voltage to get to their lowest they can be at. It's true for the JetBeam RRT01. It's true for Hank lights. You'll see that it does a little burp. Or actually, RRT01, it doesn't. You have to go past where you want to be, and then you can dial in a lower mode. So that's, I think, by design. Now, I've already shown you programming, but let's just show you stringing programming together. What I'm going to do is I am going to set position 6 to a really low, like moonlight. I'm going to use dimming for that. And I'm going to set position 1 to 1 amp. Okay? So, here we go. All right, so I'm going to take the cap off. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 for power up 4. I'm going to go ahead and put it on. Doesn't matter which one we start with. I'll start with position 1 here. And when I get position 1 locked in, there it's locked in, I'm going to set this to, let's say 2 amps, okay? So 1s, 10s, 100s, amp, 2 amps, and go back down to home. And now I decide, yes, I want to set position 6, and I want to set it to like a really low moonlight. So I'm going to go down to 0, and during this strobe, that gives me time to go up to 6. Then it's going to lock in. Wait for it to go steady. There it is. Now I'm editing 6. And I go back down to home, and then I go back to 6 to do the dimming values. And this is where I'll set something low. I won't go too low. Let's just go, it's getting lower. Let's go a little lower than this. Right there. And off. Now, once this finishes doing its sweep and everything, we're going to verify that the new position 1 is pretty bright, okay? And then, and we got to wait, by the way, all the way, because it's also setting position 1 too. So wait till all the sweeping, everything's done. Just wait till it looks like it's off. There we go. Now, I'm going to turn it on, and you see that turning it on is quite bright. It's 2 amps. And then once I go to position 2, it goes dimmer, and then up, 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 and then it goes moonlight. Now, if you're, a couple of things I want to point out here, okay? A couple of things. First off, I want to point out that there's a shortcut to maxing out the programming value. If you want to go to 3.3 amps on any position, you can also just program it to 4 amps, because anything beyond 3.3, it's just going to truncate down to 3.3. So I did 3,300 milliamps just to show you how programming works, but honestly, I just go 4 amps and then it goes to 3.3. Another thing too is that I want to point out is, now that I've mucked it all up, I want to get it back, right? So what am I going to use? Power up 3. And I'm going to go power up 3. So 1, 2, 3, and put it on, and I'll let this thing run, and it will set it back to factory default and recalibrate all in one step. So I just let this run for a while. Another thing I should point out is, if you've changed one mode in programming, it's going to kind of go through the power settings and sweep pretty quickly. But if you've changed 2 or 3 modes, it's going to have to set each one, so it takes longer. So just be ready for that. Looks like my factory sweeping has finished. And the last thing I want to point out about this before we get to Power Up 5, the last thing about programming in Power Up 4 is that the default positions as of the time of making this video, is knob position 1 is 3 milliamps, 2 is 15 milliamps, 3 is 80 milliamps, 250, 500, and 1000. So just in case you were wondering what they are. Now let's talk about Power Up 5, which is Power Level Report. This is so good because I actually have used LuxRC for a long time, and you set the wattage, so basically milliamps like we're doing here. You set the wattage though on the website, and you kind of do like an optical web programming over the screen. It's kind of fancy, but then you realize I'm in a car right now. I want to change a mode on my flashlight. You know, it's like cumbersome that you got to go to the internet, use your phone screen. Sometimes it's not always great. So the fact that you can change all the modes right on the light is awesome. But here's the big thing that I noticed about LuxRC is I got all my modes set up the way I want. I set it on the shelf, forget about it for a couple months. I get a new LuxRC light, or a friend comes over with one, and they go, "Hey, I like your modes. I like the way you got it set up. Can you set up for me?" No, because I didn't write it down, or I didn't save it on the website, or whatever, or I'm confused about the website settings, and I don't know where I'm set, and the light doesn't really have a good way to tell you or report what its settings are. The CoolFall has an excellent feature, which is called Power Report. And so what happens is you pop off the cap, you go to Power Up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you pop it on, and you got a moment to move it to whichever mode you want. So I moved it to 6. Now 6, it just flashed once. It did a dit there, a little burp. Okay, those burps mean 0. So what's reporting is that position 6 is 1 amp. Because watch. It'll do it again. 1 flash for thousands column, a 0 for hundreds, a 0 for tens, and a 0 for ones. So let's go to position 5, which should be 500 milliamps. So we're going to get a 0 for thousands. There's 0. We get 5 flashes for 500, and then we're going to get 2 zeros for tens and 100, or tens and ones, I should say. It's an excellent thing. It is so cool, man. You never, have to go, wait, what did I set it to again? It reports. It's awesome. Love that feature. And if that wasn't enough, let's talk about Power Up 6, which is battery level indicator, but it's so good. Because what it does a couple things. First off, the batteries in here are in series. So they're actually running higher than, the standard 3.7 volts, right? 4.2 volts. They're running at the 8.4 volt range. But, our brains, or at least my brain, wants to think in, 3.0 would be dead battery, 4.2 is fully charged. So first thing is it averages them out. It takes the average reading of the two and it divides by 2 and reports it to you as if it was a single battery. So that simplifies things. Another thing that it's really cool is it flashes out to 3 significant digits. It's the only light that I have that does that. I got, Hank Wang lights, the MSR lights, they'll go whole numbers and tenths, and that's it. This one goes out to, hundreds. So let's take a look at it now. So it's Power Up 6, and what we're going to do is we're going to pop it off, move it over to position 6, pop it back on, and it is going to start flashing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 volts, 4 point, and then 1, 4.1, and then it's going to get, and then a bip. The bip means 0. So that means that my average battery power right now is 4.10. Super cool. Love that feature. Now we're in part 6, the attachment rail. So on the side of each CoolFall light, there is this pattern right here, which is a miniature Picatinny type rail. And if you get this optional little attachment right here, what you can do is, let's get a good focus on this, you can actually clamp this to the rail like so. Let me pull the jaw out a little bit. A little further. There we go. and then come in like so. There you go. And you can see it clamps to the rail nice and firmly, right? Not going to come off. And that is a 1/4-20 thread right there for mounting on a tripod or something like that. So that's the attachment rail. And if you've seen this on the side of the light here, that's what it's for. I also do note that in addition to, the functionality provided when you attach it to the rail system, I noticed that the way I hold my Trek, for example, and this is my daily driver I've been having in my pocket for months, I hold it like this, flick it like this, and what's interesting about this is that my thumb tends to come right where this is in a positive way, meaning that it adds a little bit more grip, a little less chance that I'm going to drop it forward. So even though I don't use the attachment, I have one, but I don't really use it. I do like the fact that this is here. As I said, this is a very slick side over here. This gives you a positive grip. Now we're in part 7, the lanyard hole. So most Coolfall lights are designed to not have a clip. The vast majority of Coolfall lights do not have clips. The only one that does is the Trek, and that's why I finally got it, because I just wanted to be able to carry it in my pocket without a pouch or anything, and I just thought that it would be neat to have a really nice clip like this. But other Coolfalls have lanyard holes right here by the serial number. And you can see when I zoom in here, you can see that there's a milled hole right there. And so your Coolfall came with a lanyard about this long. And so what's neat about it is, first off, if you want to check out the written manual, they talk about in depth how you can go about getting that lanyard into it using kind of dental floss and making a loop and then pulling it through. But the idea here is to get something like this, right? Something like this where it gives you an extra thing to kind of grab onto with your pinky fingers back here so you don't accidentally drop the light. So I spoke to David about this, and David Livingston doesn't particularly love clips. He thinks that, lights should go in your pocket. And so this lanyard gives you one more way of pulling it out of your pocket and preventing it from being dropped. Also, some people will fabricate, like necklaces to hang the light by. Additionally, your light might have come with little beads like this. Little beads like, let me get a good focus. Like this, and those little beads, as I mentioned before in another part of the video, can go onto the lanyard as a way to open up the military cap, because the military cap needs that little, press to get this off. And one other thing I wanted to put into the section was that when you take the batteries out, I mentioned earlier that if the batteries are out and you put the cap on, that's very difficult to get the cap off because you got to kind of press and pull at the same time. That's where these things are really useful, and your light probably shipped with this, and that just gives it positive back pressure on those little springs there so that when you push, it wants to come off. Let me get this right there. There we go, like that. Okay, so that's what that is for. And also I want to point out, just now that I'm talking about it, that the spring here is really awesome because it is steel, so it's quite springy and it retains its shape, but then it's coated with silver for maximum connectivity. Okay, now we're in section 8, Easter eggs. So Easter eggs are really enabling haptic feedback. The newest versions of the Spy and Trek, anything that comes with sapphire glass, has a haptic motor under the pill that will vibrate in 3 situations. So this is something that's optional. It does not turn on by default, and if you do a factory reset, it will be gone. But you can key it in, and the way you key it in is through the back door of programming mode. So what you're going to do is you're going to program in one of 3 output amperages, either 1005 milliamps, I've got them on the screen now, 1006, or 1007. And The way that the light doesn't get confused that you're actually putting in 1005 is because you break convention, and instead of inputting it thousands first and the ones last, you invert it and you go ones first and then the thousands last. Now, if you do 1005, you're going to get haptic feedback on the switch, meaning that every time you turn the switch, it just buzzes a little bit, just to give you feedback that it's rotated. I don't think that's super useful on a Trek where the switch already kind of has its own really strongly clicky kind of ness to it. But on the Spy like this, where it rotates pretty easily, it's much more interesting, much more useful. So I like the 1005 haptic feedback on this one. Now 1006 would give you low battery haptic feedback. So basically, if you turn that on, you're not going to have haptics most of the time. And then when the battery gets to a low mode, before it shuts off, it's going to buzz to let you know the voltage is really low on your rechargeable battery. And then 1007 is haptic feedback as a reminder to let you know that the light was on. So it would pulse once every minute, just zzz, and then about 1 minute goes by, zzz, just to let you know it was on, so that if you had it on and it was in your pocket, you'd feel it, know it was on. You can't have two on at once. Sorry about that. You can't have, let's say, the minute reminder and, you know, the low voltage haptic on at the same time. You only get to pick one. And if you put it on, then it is automatically on for all the slots. So once you enable it, all the slots have this haptic. Interestingly, I noticed that if you want to clear it, the only way to clear it is to do a calibration, but that's the power up 3. But you do the power up 3 on any slot, which just calibrates that one slot, and it turns the haptic off for all slots. So let's take a look. I'll enter it in with you once so that you can kind of get a feel for it. We're going to enter in the haptic 1005, just so that every time I flick it like this, it's going to buzz a little bit. So we're going to start out by doing a power up 4. 1, 2, 3, fourth position. Add the cap here. Got to get right. I got it a little sloppy. There we go. Now it's asking which position to be in. Doesn't matter for this. So I'll just stay in fourth position. Doesn't matter. Now, once it locks in, we're going to go down to home. Okay, we're in home. Now remember, we're going to add 1005, but we're going to do it in reverse order. So we're going to add the ones first, which is not what you normally do. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just put in 5. Now I'm going to go up to the thousands. So ones, tens, hundreds, thousand. Now as I sweep downward, I felt it buzz. I felt a buzz. And then I'll go ahead and turn it off. So if you do it correctly, you will feel a buzz in the light indicating that the haptic has been turned on. So I'll go ahead and let this finish. And it's notice that it's sweeping to tell you you're done programming, but it didn't change anything about the modes of output that I was in. So I wasn't really setting output. Now, if I turn it, I can feel every time I click it, and I'll hold it up to the mic here for you. So it's really hard to pick up, but let me try again. Well, I definitely feel it. So I guess it's a good thing that's hard to hear, but it makes like a little, it feels like your phone ringing or something like that, but in your light. So cool feature. I don't know that I use it a whole lot, so I don't think you're missing much if you don't turn it on. But man, it's a feature you don't find in other flashlights, and it's definitely kind of a showpiece feature. So it's one of the things that in use I don't use a whole lot, to be honest. But you know, when I show my light off to a friend and I go, my light has haptics, they go, oh, what does that mean? And I show them and they go, oh. So it's the kind of thing that seems cool at the time. All right. Now let's go into the final chapter, which is about the battery spring, O-rings, and tritium markers. So let's take a look at the Tri-V I have here. So I want to show you the Tri-V because this cap is the military cap, and it's more simple than the quick release and the vault. So the spring's set up a little differently inside it. So let's go and pop this off. So this is the one that's the easiest to get the springs out. Now, you shouldn't be removing the springs. They should just stay there the whole time. But if the spring were to accidentally come out, and I mean, if you pull on it, they will come out. So what you're going to do is locate which of these two circles has a greater circumference that would be in contact with the spring. You can see down here, the circle is almost 180 degrees around the spring, whereas this one's like a semicircle. So I'm going to take the spring, kind of go at an angle like this, and get it started to where one of the wines is under that bottom lip. Now, the spring itself doesn't want to go in all the way because the spring is too large of a diameter. So with holding the top spring so it doesn't rotate on me, I'm going to grab this spring and actually forcefully counterclockwise rotate it to shrink the diameter of the spring. So I'm going to counterclockwise and push. Now it's in. Then I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to push hard with this finger here and do the same thing up here. So I'm twisting counterclockwise like that and pushing in. And if you look now, let's get a good focus, you can see that, especially on this side, you can see that it clearly has an entire wind under that ledge. And over here, same. There you go. So that's how you get that spring back in. Oh, another little tip that I wasn't going to go into, but I'll think about it now, is if you're doing this in total darkness, because I've done this a couple times where it's totally dark and I pop the cap off to change some settings, I got to get back on. Sometimes it's hard to get these pegs to line up. I mean, if you're looking at it in lights, you just kind of, line up where the cap looks like it's going to go, and it just clips on. It's not so bad. But what I found in darkness is, and here's my little tip, if you take the side that has the marking and the side that has the button, and you set the spring towards like the opposite side, okay? So the spring here should be touching the housing. Now, when I go to put it on like that, so it's like way offset, right? The pegs have nowhere to go because they're against this wall. Then what I'll do is I'll just kind of move down slowly, and I can feel where the pegs like slide into those little holes right there and there. So again, just kind of like this, and then I can get it on. Now that is not the way I do it when I'm in the light. It's actually slower and more cumbersome, but in the darkness, it's the only way I could feel where I was at was, again, going too high, kind of sliding down and feeling on the pegs where those two holes were, and then sliding them in. So I hope that's helpful. Now, while we're talking about the cap being off, let's talk about the O-rings here. So there's O-rings on the cap right here. There's O-rings, and there's O-rings on some of the buttons. So I was just going to mention that the O-ring sizes, if you need this larger O-ring, it's a size 20. So that's a 1-inch English sized O-ring. And if you have a military knob, like on this Tri-V, these are size 11, which is 5/16 inner diameter and 1/16 diameter for the rubber itself. Lastly, in this section, we're going to talk about tritium slots. So practically all of the Cool Fall lights have the ability to install a tritium tube into a slot on the light, which I think is excellent. Some people like tritium for showing off, like, hey, look at my fancy tritium and all around the light. And that's one thing. But I like it because when I put my Trek on my bedside table at night, I can locate it easily at 2 a.m. if I got to go get up and pee, because I just look over and I see the little green tritium tube glowing away and I can find my light. So let's take a look here on my Trek. Let's get there's two slots. There's one on the dial itself and one in the body down below. See them right there. And then on the Spy, there's no room on the Vegas knob, but there's a slot here and a slot here. So you got two tritiums parallel to each other right there. And on the Tri-V, it's even got a slot right there on this Mark II Tri-V. So the tritiums themselves, you're going to have to get them separately. These are the 5mm by 1.5mm size. I point that out because commonly they're usually 6mm by 1.5, or at least that's the one that's commonly used on like Hank lights and Lewin tops and all that. But get the 5 by 1.5, and then I used UV resin like as used in nail salons. So I used that. You can get that on Amazon. People also use Norland optical adhesive number 61. That's fine too. But I found that this UV resin that I've used here, which is the one for nail stuff, it sets with a UV light just like the Norland, and I've had some lights set with it for multiple years, never yellowed, never cracked. Now, if you want to remove the tritium for whatever reason, you can often use nail polish remover or pure acetone. It'll kind of dissolve it. And then if there's anything left, I usually use a toothpick, like a wooden toothpick, and I kind of just chip at it. But be cautious, because a couple things. One, even a wooden toothpick could potentially scratch your titanium, so just be cautious with it. And also, the tritium tube itself has a very small amount of tritium in it, but it is radioactive, so you don't want to breathe that in. And then the tube itself is a little piece of glass, so you don't want to get that shard stuck under like a fingernail or something. Okay, so that is the video manual on how to use your new Cool Fall light, whether it's a SPY 007, 05, Trek, and even the Tri-V operates much of the same way. So if you have one, I hope this was helpful to you, and feel free to like and subscribe to the channel, and I've got lots of other content on here, some of it Cool Fall related, a lot of it not. So I'll see you in my next video, and have fun with your new SPY.